Good evening, everyone. I'm Ellen Myers, the Programs and Communications Director for the Newton Free Library. Thanks for tuning in for the 86th Village Talk with Sena Desai Gopal. I welcome everyone to visit the library or come online and go to our website at newtonfreelibrary.net. We have a wealth of virtual programs and services for everyone. Please use the Q&A feature on Zoom for any questions that arise, and also note that closed captioning is enabled. You can turn it off or back on by clicking on the live CC transcript icon at the bottom of your screen. And this session is being recorded. Sena will be speaking, and then I will come back on the screen and pose your questions to her at the end of her talk. Sena Desai Gopal is the author of The 86th Village, which is based on the area she will be speaking about tonight, doomed to drown in a dam. She is a journalist specializing in science and medicine, food, and travel. Her work has been published in the Boston Globe, The Atlantic, Modern Farmer, and the Times of India, among others. And now, Sena, I turn the screen over to you.
Thank you, Ellen. Thank you for making this happen. And also thank you to the other 5 libraries that got involved in this and sponsored this project of my vanity, actually. So The 86th Village is a book that is based in a village that is supposed to drown in the backwaters of a big dam project in India, a corrupt dam project. And it's going to displace literally hundreds of thousands of people, but the government doesn't know how many exactly because it hasn't really worked on it or researched it enough. And that is what is called managed retreat. It is a new buzzword. Managed retreat is the displacement of people who are affected by different climate change issues, which could be floods, fires, drought, and this, I'll be coming back to managed retreat later in this talk, but that is what the 86th Village is about. It's about rehabilitating these people who are displaced. The premise of the 86th Village, though, is real. It is my own background in India. I come from a village in southern India that is doomed to drown in the backwaters of one of the biggest dam projects called the Upper Krishna Project. The name of my village is Yadahalli, and it is one village in 176 that will drown. The government does not know when it will drown, how much will drown, and how many villages will drown. Everything is up in the air. There's also these 176 villages and 20 others whose fate is up in the air because they could drown, they could not drown. The Upper Krishna Project was sanctioned in 1956, and construction happened in little spurts for almost an entire century. A little bit was built, then it was stopped, some more was built, and then it was stopped. And it was completely driven by the government and how corrupt it was at that point. So there were some governments which are less corrupt and managed to build the dam. And then there were others that did not. So what happened is an entire generation lived under this sword of submergence, not knowing when it would happen. So far, 123,000 families have been displaced. Some have been resettled pretty okay, but most have not. There is no concrete plan by the government. My own village, which is Yadahalli, my family has lived there for 18 generations. I'm the 18th generation, and I live in the United States. So I kind of, dumped them, I guess. And the house we live in is about 300 years old. And the way 86 Village came about is like this. I started investigating the problem, investigating the project to perhaps write a book. And while I was investigating it, I realized that I was very biased. There was no way I could like write a journalistic piece because I was one of the victims of the dam. So what I did is I took all that information I had, which was scientific information, nonfiction, and used that as a backdrop to write a novel. So the 86 village, the backdrop is real. It is nonfiction. It is based in science and statistics. But the story that I've written is a love story. It's fictitious. It's about, it's people who I don't know. I've created the people. Often people ask me if any of the characters are people I know. They're not, because I created them. And ultimately, it is a book. It's a love story. It is about a little girl who shows up in this village, the 86 village that's about to drown. And the mystery of her life completely changes the village. It makes it feel vulnerable, and it puts the lives of many people at stake when the mystery of this little girl is exposed. So that is where it lies. And this whole situation is made even more complex because of climate change. And because of climate change, the rains in this area are erratic. There's a lot of rain one year, and then there is none the next year. Sometimes there is so much rain and so quick that people have literally hours to leave their villages and find a place to live. And most of these are poor communities, and they just go to higher ground and make makeshift shacks where they live until the floods have receded. And sometimes the floods are a few weeks, and sometimes they're a few months. So with that, I could talk to you about managed retreat for a while, but I thought the pictures here would explain it better, and then we can go into the details. So yeah, Ellen, these are pictures of my village and my home. And after that, I'll show you pictures of how this area drowns, so you can get an idea about managed retreat that's more visual. So Ellen, that's slide number 1. That is the main gate of my 300-year-old ancestral home. And this house is going to drown very soon. Ellen, can I have the next slide, please? This is the front of my home. And I'm only showing you all this to give you a sense of life as it was, and you can compare it to the life that will be. Ellen, can I have the next one, please? I call this the summer tower in my house. I'm showing it to you. So we use the summer tower in the summers when temperatures go to 42 degrees centigrade. And the 2 rooms in the summer tower are always cool just because of how it was constructed, maybe like 200 years ago. And I'm showing you this picture because you can see a lot of black, and that is mold. It's mold because the water table is rising and water is seeping up the walls, creating mold. And though the house may not flood for a while, we have to leave because there is mold everywhere and it's unlivable. Next slide. A picture of a courtyard. These courtyards are very common in this area. Houses have several courtyards, so there's ventilation. And this courtyard was probably built maybe at least 250, 300 years ago. Next one, please. I call this the darbar, or the courthouse. So traditionally, the elders of the village gathered here to listen to petty squabbles, sometimes not petty squabbles, civil and criminal strife in the village, and they passed judgment. They decided who should be penalized and who should not. And most people came here because it was cheaper and things were sorted out very quickly. As going to a court of law, at some point, the court of law was under the administration of the British, and that was even worse. So this is where all this happened until maybe a few decades ago when things changed in India. Next. I put this picture of a lantern, a kerosene lantern, because we use this in my house a lot. There are huge power outages because villages like mine, like Yadahalli, are doomed to drown. and the government does not invest in them anymore. And this investment stopped several decades ago. So power outages are huge, and people try to find an alternate way of lighting up, and the kerosene lamp is what they use. And this was a lamp that was used in the 1940s and 50s before electricity came to Yadahalli, and now we're back to the 40s or 50s. Next one. I'm just showing you pictures of different parts of our house, so you get an idea of, what it looks like, a traditional Indian home. Next one. This is the porch. Next one. This is the formal living room where I spent many hours being forced to talk to people that I knew nothing about and did not really like. Next one. This is the family arms. And dacoits, something like Robin Hood, dacoits would attack and plunder Yadahalli and other villages. So there was always a lot of arms to protect ourselves. My grandfather would actually go to bed with a revolver by his head because you never know when they would attack. And on the top there, you see the head of a leopard. Leopards are very common here, and they started coming into our house maybe, until even like 40 years ago. They would come into our house and pick cattle and go away. And of course, my grandfather shot one or two to protect the village and protect the animals, and that's how the head ended up there. Next one, please. This is a Shiva temple right outside my house. It is a World Heritage Site. It's about 250 years old, but it will drown, and the Indian government will not do anything about it because they don't have the money. Next one, Ellen. This is a cobra shrine on my parents' property. So all through history, people have worshipped things that they're scared of. And one of the things they're scared of is the cobra, which is pretty common in this area. So there's a shrine for the cobra, and the farmers and, their families, they will come and worship there and plead to be spared. But it's such an interesting phenomenon because there are shrines for different animals, even different plants scattered all through the area. This is a very traditional agricultural community that is going to be obliterated. Ellen, next one. I had to take this picture this last August when I went to India. It's a bullock cart festival. So these bullocks are painted in glorious colors. These haven't been painted yet, but they will. And then there is a bullock cart race. It's a festival. Next one, please. All right, so that is my husband on the left playing chess with one of the village kids who happens to be a very, very close friend of my children. And I don't know who won. So that is something I don't know yet. Next one. That is the group of friends of my children. You can see my daughter, she's on the left. And these are kids that my kids have grown up with since they were 1 or 2 or 3. And it's given them a totally different perspective on life, because here they are growing up in a fairly affluent American society. And then they have these other friends who have like one pair of shoes that they wear to school. So it just has changed the perspective so much in terms of determining what is important in life. Can I have the next one? That is my daughter, Anya, petting a newborn water buffalo that was born in my parents' like cowshed last August, yes. Ellen, next one. This is a village festival. I have no idea what was being celebrated, but it was really, really colorful and interesting, and everyone was having so much fun. So I thought it should be in my slideshow. Next one, please. So these are the forests around my village, Yadahalli. A lot of them have been rejuvenated because my father is an environmentalist and ecologist. So in the last 40, 50 years, he has managed to bring them back because they were being deforested. Anyway, my kids did a project. I have a 17-year-old and a 15-year-old, and they did a project last year where they went into the forests with some forest officials and learned to identify all different plants, the edible plants, the edible berries, the medicinal plants. That was a big thing, the medicinal plants, because they realized when they saw the medicinal plants that many of the chemicals that were in there were used in modern day medicine. Next one, please. I just like this picture and I put it in. It's a farmer who is taking fodder home for his cattle. Ellen, next one. This is a very common bird that is near all around our village. It's called the tailor bird or the baya. They make these beautiful, beautiful nests. And many, many dozens will, make nests. So a tree will be filled with maybe 10, 20 nests. And the fun part is that once they nest and they start a family, they leave. So you have a tree full of empty nests that you can use for anything. Like you can make vases or you can just play with them. And that was such a precious part of my childhood because I would go harvest these nests when the birds had left. Next one. Marigold fields around my village, actually in the whole area. Marigold is a big crop. Ellen, next one. Sunflower fields. They're absolutely gorgeous. And they flower for like 3 months from June to September. And sunflower oil is the oil that people use in this area. Ellen, next one, please. So this is a really fun slide, and I'll tell you why. So there are what I call traveling sari saleswomen who go from one house to the other with these beautiful saris to sell them. So it's almost like a Tupperware party in your house. So this woman visited when I was there last in August, and this happened many, many times. It's just that I hadn't seen it in many years, so I took a picture. So she visited my parents' house on a Sunday afternoon. And before we know it, all my aunts and my mom have gotten together and they are having a sari party. So they picked whatever saris they want, and then they had tea, chai, and they had samosas. And I think it was really fun. And almost everyone walked away with a sari or two. Ellen, next one. So I'm including some pictures of my childhood because I'll be talking about that too later. So this was my childhood, and these were the kids that I played with. There was at one time there would be like 10, 15 kids in our house, and we would spend all day together in the summer. And it was magical. It was magical to be born and raised in this part of the world. Ellen, next one. This is me and my cousin. I'm on the right and my cousin on the left, and we're harvesting eggplant from the family farm. So the eggplants in this area are very popular. It's the volcanic soil and the mineral content of the Krishna River that is used to irrigate these fields that makes them really very tender, and they have very thin skin, so you can actually just eat them raw. And this is one crop, one of many that will probably be done away with when the floods happen, because there's no way they can be cultivated in the same way. Ellen, next one. This is just a fun picture of me in the forest around a house with binoculars and that stick that I thought I would be able to get rid of. What are the animals there, right? Leopards and leopards and bison and a lot of animals. Next one. This is me with my Manny, who still is a part of my life. He's now in his 70s. Next one. This is me and my cousins building a fire by our house. We used to do that a lot. Next one. And this is the dam that destroyed all this life that I showed you. This is the Almaty Dam that was sanctioned in 1956 and has obliterated every little bit of the tradition of the area and the communities that have grown there in over several hundred centuries. Ellen, the next one. This is how my village looks. It's a drone picture. This is how it looks most of the year when the river isn't flooding. Ellen, next one, please. And this is when the water starts coming closer and closer to the village and closer to our home. So that is probably like the first stage. Next one. And this is when the water is really close to my backyard. So I showed you the picture of the summer tower, and you can see that tower now from the top. And the water is right by our house. And this is somewhere in mid-monsoon, and by the end of monsoon, it is at our doorstep. So there's only one way to get out of the village when that happens. Ellen, next one. This is a picture of the water from my backyard. This is what you see at the peak of monsoon. Ellen, next one, please. This is a picture of my family graveyard. And I think about half of it is submerged at this point. And by the end of monsoon, almost all of it will be submerged. And about 18 generations of my family are buried there, and they are going to be underwater. Next one, please. So water buffalo, these guys are the only ones that are really, really happy with the whole situation, because they have this huge lake and they go strolling in the lake in the morning. They find some place to eat and then they come back at the end of the day, very happy. Ellen, next one. This is a close-up open. They come out, at the end of the evening. And no matter how much the river rises, they're able to get through it. They are the heroes of backwater lakes. Ellen, next one. So this is the well on my family property that was fed by natural springs, and I learned to swim over here. It is the size of an Olympic pool, and it was beautiful growing up, but now it is flooded by muddy floodwater from the backwaters of the project. Next one, please. So this is, I consider this a really poignant picture, because this man whose family still lives in Yadahalli, there are several families who still live in Yadahalli who haven't left. He's just watching how quickly the river is rising. And if it's rising too quickly, then he has to move his family out of there very fast. So he's just trying to gauge how fast the river is rising. Next one. I'm just showing you pictures of the rest of the village. Most of it is in ruins. And it has been abandoned maybe for 7-8 years now. Next one, Ellen. Another picture of village in ruins. Next one. So this is a street right outside my house. When I was growing up, this street was bustling with activity. There were kids running around. There were women who would finish their morning chores and they would come out and hang out. And then there were men who were gossiping, smoking their BDs or cigarettes or whatever. So it was full of life. And now it's completely dead. There's no one living on that street. Everyone has moved out. Ellen, next one. So this is a house that people still live in Yadahalli, in my village. Some families have chosen not to leave yet. So this is one of those houses. They're still painting their exterior. They're still maintaining it. If you notice, it's in tip-top shape. And I don't know the reason why they continue living there, but I would guess it's more sentimental than practical. Ellen, next one. So this is a picture I took on a whim. The entire village is dead. You don't see many children. You don't see many adults. But then there is this lone pink tricycle that belongs to a child. So obviously there are children there who are still playing. And I just thought it was such a sad representation of what is going on, because now we're looking at a child's pink tricycle and realizing that it's really a rare sight. Next one. So this is the waters coming close and closer to our backyard. After this stage, within about a week, this whole place will be flooded. Like those coconut palms you see there, the water will be almost to the top. And the next one, please. This is an abandoned road in ruins, hasn't been used for maybe decades. Pink sandstone is the stone in this area. So when anything deteriorates or is eroded, this is what you're left with. And this road was eroded. As a child, I do remember using this road a lot to get to different, farms of my cousins or friends for different, reasons. Ellen, next one, please. This is an aerial shot of the backwater lake. You can see how far it reaches, and this will ultimately flood 176 villages. Ellen, next one. Another view of the backwater lake. Next one, Ellen. Okay, so I'm showing you this picture because it's a totally different story to what I've told you so far. These are women and little girls who are coming home. The women are coming home from a day of work, and the little girls are coming home from school. They all live in this village called Chaudapur. You don't have to remember the name, just that it's a village of 300 people. And I visited there this past summer because I was doing an investigative piece for the Boston Globe on all the problems that were being seen here. And this is the only access road to the village. And if you notice, it's just a few feet above the water. And this picture was taken mid-monsoon. So by the end of monsoon, the water is going to flood the road. And that is the only road to get to the village. So these people will move and build makeshift shacks somewhere and live there for like 3 or 4 months, waiting for the water to recede. The hard part about this population is that they're day laborers. They don't own land. So the government, when it wants to rehabilitate them, doesn't know how to do it because there is nothing specified for day laborers. They're not entitled to anything. Next one, Ellen. So I met this woman. She did not know how old she was, but she had a grandchild and she was combing the grandchild's hair. And she told me that her family 20 years ago was given $1,000 by the government to relocate somewhere else. And what they didn't tell how to do was, how do you relocate a livelihood? How do you relocate a blacksmith who lives in a village and create another village for him where his services will be required? So what happened is those $1,000, because this population is also illiterate and uneducated, they just spent it on things that did not matter. And now they don't have no means of moving when the flood waters start coming in. Ellen, what's the next one? So this is a funny story I have. He was a village elder in Chaudapur who, when he saw me let loose, he was so mad. And he yelled at me. He yelled at me and he said, "How dare you do this? How dare you, do this?" Because these are what I call the forgotten people. These are the forgotten people. They're not on anyone's radar. And he yelled at me. And then it was a while before I realized that he thinks I'm a government official and I'm not a government official. So I turned to him and I said, I'm not a government official. I am actually a journalist. And I'm here to write about you and, to bring to light everything. And then he was so repentant and he kept apologizing for the next hour. Ellen, next one. This is my woman in red. She was a fiery woman in that village who told me certain things. And one of the things she told me was that most of the men in the village were alcoholics. And she was right. So they're day laborers. The men are day laborers. They go work 3 mornings a week and they make money. And whatever money they make, they blow on drink. And so in the end, it's up to the women to work and to take care of their families. And the interesting part of all this was, as soon as she started talking about the men, as you see in the background, they just started leaving. And by the end of the interview, I had no men to talk to. Next one, please. This is a picture of some of the kids in Chaudapur in the village. And I'm showing you this because there is one child there that you see wearing a yellow t-shirt. And his name was Shalil, and I talked to him a little bit. He has pretty severe juvenile diabetes. And his mother needs 200 rupees, which is $3 for him to get his insulin shot every month, and she can't afford it. So all the women in the village pool the money they can spare and make sure that he gets his insulin shot. So this is the level of poverty and neglect that these communities are facing. Next one, please. So I visited a tribal village too, which will be underwater. And I have no idea how the government is going to rehabilitate these tribes who have lived here off the land for many, many, many centuries. And when I went to this village and I told them what I was doing, the women, they went in and dressed up in their best clothes. They make all these clothes and jewelry themselves, and they posed for a picture. Next one, Ellen. So I want you to look up this story called When the Krishna Rises in the Boston Globe that I did a few weeks ago, and it was a cover story. It will tell you the story of, in short, the story of this area and of the forgotten people, as I say, the story of the forgotten people in this area. Ellen, next one. Ellen, next one. Oh, no, before this, yeah, thank you. So that is how the 86 village happened, because I was researching all this and I could not put it as a piece of journalism. So I wrote a book of fiction. But in all this, there is also some beauty. Ellen, next one. Before this, yeah. So my father is a wildlife photographer in India, and he took these pictures of animals and birds near our house. So the wildlife in this area has really thrived because the humans are out, they've moved away, and the animals are coming back. So these flamingos are literally, you can sit in my backyard and see these flamingos. And in the winter, in December, January, when they breed, there's literally hundreds. And it's an amazing sight. Ellen, next one. That's a monkey. And despite what people think, they're really annoying. This one was hanging outside my room window forever, like just looking in all the time. The next one, Ellen. And this is a leopard. I think my dad took this picture, not in our backyard, thankfully, but in the surrounding forest. And yeah, this is a leopard. So that's all I have for the slideshow. And if you want to reach me, I'm always available on email. I have a website, I have a Twitter account, Instagram, Facebook. If you want to talk to me about how bad my book is or how good it is, I'm absolutely open to comments and feedback. And I wanted to quickly, if possible, like just touch on, yeah, excuse me, I have to get my notes for this because there's so many statistics involved. So I wanted to touch on, managed retreat, because it is something that is not really new to the world. And definitely not new to the United States. So managed retreat is basically the displacement of communities, towns, villages, cities, whatever have you, due to climate change issues, floods, fires, droughts. And the first managed retreat in the United States actually happened in 1881 in this town in Nebraska called Niobrara. And there was an ice dam and people rehabilitated themselves. But that was when it was done by the townspeople themselves. And since then, the government took over and took responsibility for doing the managed retreats. But it's really not that easy because the government, it's a universal problem, and governments around the world are struggling with how are we going to rehabilitate these populations and how much will it cost? And many times they don't have the money or the funds to do it. You have one hurricane like Hurricane Irma, it devastated Florida, and then the government started buying and bulldozing property there to make way for the ocean. And one of the best examples of managed retreat that is going to happen is Seaport. that billions of dollars have been spent to gentrify this area and to build whatever restaurants and make it so cool. But it is the most vulnerable part of Boston. And no one has really thought about how it's going to move forward. Construction companies right now are building things on elevated ground. I don't know how sustainable that is, but I guess it's an option. In Indonesia actually is shifting its entire capital, Jakarta, because it's going to be flooded within the next few decades. Japan is spending $265 billion to build towns and cities along the coast because they will also be flooded by the turn of the century. And there's a prediction that sea levels will rise by about 6 feet by the end of the century. And there will be no place to go, and there won't be any solutions if that happens, unless something is done now and we can reverse the whole situation. So that is what managed retreat is. And I think I'm done talking. Ellen, what do you think? I'm done talking, right?
Sena, it's been fascinating to listen to you, to hear the stories of your childhood home and, get the feeling for what it's like in the area of India that you come from. I do want to invite people to use the Q&A feature for their questions. And while people are sort of pondering that and thinking about what they might want to ask you, I have a couple of questions myself.
Yeah.
I may have missed what you were saying at the beginning, but what part of India are you from?
Southern India. Yeah, actually, Ellen, I didn't mention it. Yeah, but Southern India. Yeah.
What province specifically?
It's called Karnataka. Yeah, it's mostly Southern India. It's called Karnataka, and I'm specifically from North Karnataka. There are about 30 states in India, so it's really hard to remember names even for me.
Can you say a little bit more about, exactly why the dam was built and who it benefits? There's a whole population of people whose lives are being devastated by this dam, but what is the benefit overall?
So the dam was built, it was sanctioned in 1956. And the interesting thing was that it was sanctioned and funded by the World Bank. Because they believed, the World Bank believed at that time, that every arid region in the world could be converted into an irrigated region. So, people in the arid regions could have irrigated land and, have whatever their agriculture. What they hadn't thought about is how much land are you going to flood to irrigate that land? So here, in this project, I think the 3 times the irrigated, non-irrigated land is going to be flooded. So say, for example, 300 acres are going to be flooded to irrigate 100 acres.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of those 300 acres are going to be flooded, but no one thought of these. And this was Ellen, this happened for many decades, right? Until people realized that big dams were not the solution and they had to do other things. But the thing with India is that this project dragged on and on and on and on. So it's still being built because it can't not be built. India also got out of the World Bank loan, and it came up with its own money. And the reason they did it is World Bank had guidelines that you could only build a project if you did this. And one of it was rehabilitating. So once India got out of the World Bank loan, they were answerable to no one and they could do what they wanted. They didn't have to rehabilitate people if they didn't want to. What they hadn't expected is that the people would be up in arms, and now people are more aware of their rights and they are protesting and not letting the government get away with it. And I think the government is basically pretty much stuck because they don't know what to do.
The picture of the dam that you showed, made it look like the project is probably mostly complete. And I'm wondering if, when you talk about monsoons, and particularly the pictures that you showed of the monsoon season as it progresses and how it encroached upon your family ancestral home, has the dam in its current state impacted or caused an increase in the floods, or were the floods a normal occurrence prior to the dam?
Oh, no, good question. The floods were not what they are now. Part like lowland areas would flood a little bit for a few weeks. And what happened is when they flooded, they left back really fertile volcanic soil. So it was a few weeks and they weren't flooding any of the villages or towns. They're flooding like low-lying areas. And then the farmers could go there and actually grow another season of crops. But now when the floods come, they stay there for 5 or 6 months. And they come very close to villages. Many of them are completely underwater. We are not yet, but we'll get there. So yeah, people are leaving, have left.
I mean, one of our viewers wants to know how, you said the floods last about 5 or 6 months
Yeah.
each year, but do people move away temporarily, or how do they survive the floods?
So some people move away temporarily, and that was the slides I showed you about Chodapur, where people move away for just a few months. But then there are people who have moved out completely because they don't want to deal with this erratic behavior of the rains, not knowing when they'll flood. So most of my village, Yadahalli, has moved out. We're just sticking around because we want to stick around. But most people have moved.
In terms of climate change, do you have any policy suggestions for managed retreat that has worked and is leaving the retreat to market forces like insurance companies, for example, an option?
I don't know of any retreat that has really worked. But I'm sure there is, but I don't know. Because it's not just the physical displacement and resettlement of people. It is much, much deeper than that. You have to resettle their livelihoods, their culture. These communities have grown around, along the river for centuries and centuries. So it's not an easy thing. And as I said, if a blacksmith in the village is being rehabilitated, you need to create a village where that needs a blacksmith. And that's not an easy thing to do.
I mean, is managed, not forced managed retreat, because that's obvious, but is managed retreat more or less a buzzword that's really sort of not bringing forth, even the concept bringing forth any solutions?
Is it bringing any solutions? I think from what I know, the solutions are happening as it is happening. It is different for every situation and the movement of different people. For example, in Florida, when they didn't move people, they moved people, but they also bought property and they're bulldozing it to make way for the oceans. Whereas in other parts of the world, like I also gave you an example in Nebraska. So that was a resettlement of an entire community. So eventually, I think entire cities and towns will disappear.
It's just incredible. It's really incredible. One anonymous attendee wants to know what happened to the submerged graves.
To the submerged? Sorry.
Graves. Your ancestors.
Oh, my family's graves. So they flood a few months and then the flood waters recede, but they're falling apart because the solid structures, the temples that are carved, and they were carved by the best sculptors, just because my family had access to them, and there's 18 generations of graves there, but it's going to be gone. And it was deemed a World Heritage Site, but it wasn't treated as one, and the government didn't try to save it. Probably they couldn't, but this is not the story of just my family. It's of many, many families in the area. They're very historical, they're very traditional families who've lived there for 300, 400, 500 years, and they're facing the same issues.
Do you notice a trend towards a psychological or emotional distress among the people in your area of India that are being affected by this?
Do I see emotional distress?
Or psychological distress?
No, because I think Indians are just resilient. India has been ruled by the Mughals, then the British, and now by corrupt politicians. And I think they just know how to get on with their lives.
Yes, in fact, someone is asking what form of government exists in that area of India, and is the local government doing anything to help people?
The local government is doing things to help people. It's just not enough. And also the other problem is the people themselves, because sometimes the government builds, resettlement camps and, expects people to move and live there. But it doesn't happen because these people don't have the know-how. So what they do, interestingly, is rent out those properties that the government has built for them, and they continue to live in their shacks and slums. So it's not a one-way street. Even if the government tries, sometimes they don't succeed because they cannot win the people over.
By the way, I want you to know that Papu wrote and said that this was extremely interesting and informative, and that they're very proud of you. I'm sure that.
Thank you. That's my cousin.
I will do my best to pronounce this person's name. That they put their name in the question, so I believe they want it. I think it's Nikhil Shalamakuri is from southern India as well. And the other village that you mentioned wants to know, was that village vulnerable to floods as well? I'm not sure specifically which village they meant.
Oh, did they mean Chaudhapur? The one I showed?
Perhaps.
Yeah. So was it vulnerable to floods? Absolutely, it was vulnerable to floods, which is why I talked about that one access road, which was just a few feet above the water mid-monsoon. So by the end of monsoon, it would be flooded, isolating the village completely, because that was the only road to get to the village. Yeah, I think she's talking about the village where the village elder yelled at me. I think that was the village.
Has there been any reaction to your articles and now your book in India?
Yes, I don't know articles as much as the book. So articles I've been writing about for a while, and they're all personal essays, though. They're not journalistic works because, again, as I said, I'm the victim in this project. But the book was released in April of this year, and then in the summer, I went to India in July, and there was a Meet the Author event that my family organized, and there were 600 people there. And they all wanted to talk about how they were affected by this. And this was an issue, book apart, it was an issue that was so close to their hearts that they totally got it. And that was an honor to even talk to all of them, because so many of them were like officials and dam activists. And all of them spoke. I mean, the dam activists spoke, and I just was like reduced to tears because I didn't know what to do. They all had a story to tell, and they'd all been in this much longer than I have. Some of them have been fighting for this 40, 50 years.
We have a rather long question. I'm just going to paraphrase. This person particularly enjoyed your book and is speaking many accolades, and they are wondering if you could have narrated the story as a memoir, and want to know what motivated your decision not to write a realist fiction or memoir, but instead to use a setting as a backdrop for a thriller.
Good question. So I wouldn't write a memoir because I don't think I've reached that stage in my life where I feel I'm evolved enough or wise enough or know the world enough to write a memoir, because I feel you should write a memoir. You've reached a stage where you have enough experiences that you can talk about them to people, or mainly like to preach about them to people. Not even preach, but to be able to add something in terms of human perspective. I don't think I'm at that stage, and I probably won't be for a long time.
And we'll just take this one last question. Will the book be made into a movie or a TV series?
That is something that I really, really am trying to do, because when I wrote the book, I wrote it so that it could lend itself to film easily. So I don't know if it's going to be a movie, but I would like it to be a series. I think it would be 6 episodes if it was. And I am talking to, some people to see if it'll happen, but it's a long road, and it may happen, it may not happen. But I hope it happens.
I think many of us do, because I feel like getting the word out might sort of tie into this. Actually, one more question came in, which is, what do you think should be done for these villages? And I will add to that, what do you think anyone who's on this call, who's interested, could do to help?
I don't think so. I don't think anyone can do anything to help except be aware of the situation. There's enough help over there. There's enough educated, literate people. And all said and done, this is one project in India that managed to get people some compensation for everything they would lose. It's the first time it ever happened. And that is why the government was stuck, because they hadn't expected this literate, educated protest, right? So there's nothing to do to help on the ground, but to be aware that these things are happening around the world is a big deal, because this is one such thing. Only one project, and it just happened that I lived there and I went abroad and I studied and I did all this, that it changed my perspective. But there's many projects like this where there is no one who can speak about them.
Mm-hmm. Well, Sena, I want to thank you. I think we'll wrap the program up. It was a very interesting and fascinating true life story that you shared with us, and we greatly appreciate it. I want to thank the Ashland Public Library for use of their Zoom, and our other co-sponsoring libraries, many of whom have had patrons in the audience tonight, including the Carey Memorial Library in Lexington, the Maynard Public Library, the Tewksbury Public Library, and the Watertown Free Public Library. And of course, I'm coming to you from the Newton Free Library. And with that, I'll thank you all and say good night.
Thank you so much, Ellen, and thank you the other libraries. I really appreciate this effort that you made and believed in my book.